Crystal.
Stuart.
We're at PDAC.
We're at PDAC.
We're in Toronto.
PDAC 2025.
2025. PDAC, the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada, has a very large mining conference every year in Toronto, Canada. And last year, I think they had like 30,000 attendees.
Yeah, and I think this year we're expecting about the same or more.
Big show.
Big show. We're
Very
happy to
big
be
show,
here. Yeah. So tell me, what are you excited about this year?
So I'm excited to see how the higher commodity prices, especially in precious metals and copper, how they impact sentiment here among the junior explorers and even some of the majors.
Yeah, me too. I'm curious to see what the junior market's going to look like this year. You know, last year was kind of quiet, but from what we've seen in our business, things have been picking up, which is great.
Picking up, yeah. And what we see is that a lot of these shows, PDAC and AME, the Association for Mineral Exploration, has a conference in Vancouver, Canada in January. Between AME and PDAC, we can really get a good read on the year, how things are going to go. And it's generally a pretty good predictor, going around talking to people, seeing how things are going, seeing what they're excited about, you know, what's going on with new projects and stuff.
Exactly. What do you think is going to be the hot commodity this year?
I think copper.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think copper projects are going to get a lot of momentum.
Okay.
I think gold projects, gold and silver, are starting to pick up. Even though the silver price has been improving, the junior miners in the silver area are still getting beaten down.
Yeah.
So maybe not as much enthusiasm there, but definitely with the gold, I think we're going to see behind closed doors and at some of the socials and stuff, I think there's some deals going on in the gold space that'll be really exciting.
Cool.
So that's something to watch. But overall, I think just copper is going to be really solid.
What about uranium? That's been seeming to pick up a little bit lately.
Uranium will be interesting, and we're going to a social tomorrow, a uranium social that's sponsored by some of the junior companies that are developing projects and a couple of the producers. Energy Fuels will be there. They're the only producer in the United States. They have a conventional mill outside of Moab, Utah, down by Blanding, actually, which is a place not very many people know about, so I just say Moab. But some of the producers will be there. It's really been on and off. It's a tricky one. It's so tied to geopolitics and what's going on globally that it'll be interesting to see how that plays out this year.
Yeah, I agree. I'm curious to see how long the spike will last. Is this going to be like a gradual climb, or is it just like a hot spike in the commodity and then everyone forgets about it in a year and a half?
Yeah, and the hot spike really happened a year ago, and we've been in a decline since, but some of that momentum's still lingering and there's still projects going on, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out this year.
Cool. I'm excited to see how the show goes.
Yeah, I'm excited for the show too. So next we'll walk around, maybe bring in a few more people for interviews, and then we'll provide some updates as we go. And at the end of today, I think we'll sit down and kind of do a recap of the day and what we saw, who we talked to, what some of the big trends are, and we'll see if our predictions play out.
Awesome. Hey, what do you guys think of my new hat?
I think it's
pretty
awesome.
Snazzy. I'm digging it.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool hat. All right. See you soon. I'm here with Bruno Hegner, the Chief Operating Officer at Burgex and a veteran of the mining industry. Bruno has worn many hats over the years, ranging from big companies to junior mining companies, and now on the service provider side. Bruno, welcome to PDAC.
Thank you.
So, what do you think of the show so far?
So far, the show it's Sunday, so it's a little quiet today.
A little quiet today.
But down in the exploration floor, it looks like it's very busy as always.
Yeah, I've noticed there's quite a few people over there, and it seems to be about the same size it was last year, but a little bit of a different composition in who's attending this year.
Exactly. So it looks like critical minerals are the actual flavor of the year this year, as opposed to base metals, precious metals. And so that should make for a very interesting show.
So which critical minerals in particular are you seeing a lot of interest around?
So there are three actually that we're seeing: fluorspar,
Fluorspar,
tungsten,
tungsten,
and antimony.
Antimony. And fluorspar and tungsten are both used in steel making.
That's correct.
And hardening and different applications for defense, aerospace, things like that. What's antimony used for?
Good question.
Good question. That is a good question. It's something that I don't think would produce commercially in the United States in a long time.
Not in a long time. Not since the end of the critical minerals program back in the 60s.
Yeah, where there were government stockpiles.
Right.
Yeah. So actually out of all three, fluorspar, tungsten, and antimony, there are no current commercial producers in the United States.
To the best of my knowledge and belief, there are no commercial operations this year.
Yeah, so there's Ares Strategic, right in Utah, is working on a fluorspar operation. So there's at least one in process, but I'm not aware of any antimony or tungsten projects that are anywhere advanced towards where they'd be in production.
So that's correct. I'm familiar with one tungsten project out in Nevada that was run by Union Carbide in the 1960s and then shut down when it became a little bit more economic to import materials from China.
Isn't that out by Bishop?
It's out by Winnemucca.
Winnemucca,
the one I'm thinking of, right.
Yeah, so Union Carbide had another one out by Bishop, and Union Carbide also had one by Rachel, Nevada. It was a pretty big operation, the Emerson mine, and I think that ran into the 90s and then shut down, and I think that was it for tungsten in the United States.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's exciting. Antimony projects, we have Stibnite Ridge up in Idaho that's moving forward. Finally, I think they've cleared some log jams. I know a bunch of litigation was recently filed to try to get it all gummed up again, but there's still a lot of interest there. I think we'll see some potentially critical minerals and antimony specific companies here next year.
I'd be surprised if there wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so once again, I would imagine Utah would be at the forefront of some of those exploration areas.
Definitely.
There is, after all, an antimony Utah.
It's true, antimony Utah, and I know there's antimony down around St. George, Utah. There's antimony that's been found. We definitely have fluorspar out around Spore Mountain. And then tungsten, there's several different areas of Utah that have tungsten.
Right.
They produced tungsten commercially during World War II out in Gold Hill.
So the West Desert of Utah is very underexplored, and it does host our one known fluorspar deposit, as well as the world's only operating beryllium mine. And so no telling what else is out there.
And geologically and geographically, they're located in a very tight area. So it's really interesting to kind of see someday all that'll be pieced together and we'll figure out how that whole system came together.
And so we've seen quite a bit of activity for lithium exploration in the Great Basin, and people think that the Great Basin ends at the Nevada state line. It doesn't. And so the West Desert of Utah is the Great Basin, and I would imagine we can expect to find those sorts of minerals out there.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the gold trends that start in Nevada that are really popular continue into the Great Basin of Utah, but the amount of exploration that's been done on the Utah side of the border is probably 100th what's happened on the Nevada side.
So I've seen prospects out on the West Desert in Utah where if it was just over the line in Nevada, they'd be drilled out like Swiss cheese. So if there's one place to go in the Western United States that's wide open, that's where it is.
There you go. Explore Utah, particularly the West Desert and the Great Basin. Brought to you by the state of Utah. No, just us. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember working on a project just across the Utah border, up in northwestern Utah, and the president of the small junior company said there's one thing wrong with this project, and it's not in Nevada.
Right.
and it really did hamper them. They had a really hard time raising capital, and the same deposit continued onto the Nevada side, and there was another company working that side, and that was actually theoretically the smaller part of the deposit, and they really, that was their core project, and their market cap was almost 5 times the Utah side, and similar jurisdictions, permitting wise, regulatory wise, potentially much larger. They were both advanced to about the same stage, but being in Nevada was the big bonus.
People just think that that's where the minerals end, and it's not true.
Yep, and there are plenty in Nevada, and they're not under a lot of cover, and they're easy to find, so it's made for good exploration. But yeah, neighboring states, Utah potentially very underexplored. Yeah, I said for a long time that Arizona was underexplored, but now it's starting to catch up. I see a lot in Arizona.
Right. So the thing that's not unusual, I mean, it's the same conditions that you had in Nevada, but the great freshwater lakes.
Oh, yeah.
That were still there 12,000 years ago, and have deposited lots of industrial minerals, evaporites, and that. And then the geologic history of Utah, where at one time there were desert oceans, which have left evaporites. We see gypsum, for instance.
Gypsum.
Throughout Utah.
Interesting one, yeah, we had Lake Bonneville, and in Nevada they had Lake Lahontan and others, so that's very similar that way. And overall, I mean, it's all Great Basin geology too, so it's the same events and structures on different scales, but it's very similar.
Right.
Interesting. Well, I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for
giving us
having
a little bit of insight, and we'll carry on with the show.
All right.
So hi, we're here again at PDAC. We're on our 3rd day here, and I have a new guest, Ro. So Ro, please tell me about yourself.
Hi there, Crystal. My name is Roald Strand. I'm a professional geoscientist, and my background is hydrogeochemistry.
Hydrogeochemistry?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, I work in the space between rocks and water.
Okay.
Okay, so what that means is that when we mine, we expose a lot of different rocks that have been underground for a long time. When those rocks come out of ground, they get exposed to oxygen, and sulfide oxidation occurs, which can release metals and acid. Those aren't very good for the environment, so we try to fix what we do in a way to manage the risk and reduce impacts to the environment.
Cool, interesting. So you could say like you're very environmentally conscious of what you're pulling out of the ground to make sure we're not contaminating things on the surface. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable way to put it. Fundamentally, I'm beholden to the environment, but I work on behalf of my clients to help manage the waste in a sustainable way.
Cool. And what aspect about like the environment do you like really care about?
Yeah, well, that's a tough question. I mean, all parts really, but realistically, I'm really passionate about water.
Okay.
Yeah.
About water.
Yeah.
Nice. And how does that play into the mining industry?
Well, water is so important. I mean, at a fundamental level, we need water. I mean, you need water, I need water, but mining also needs water. So whether or not it's through dewatering to make sure that you're, if you're hard rock mining and you have to dewater, then you dewater because you want your explosives to function better. So you dewater in advance of blasting, for example, which makes everything work better. You need water for processing. We use water in mining for transport of waste products like tailings.
Right.
And then, of course, water ultimately is like the blue stream that connects everything. Right?
Yes.
In the environment, of course, everything is dependent on water.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. So what got you into the mining industry?
Well, it actually does come back to water, it turns out. So I grew up in the Kootenays, which is in the southeast corner of BC.
Oh, cool.
And
it's a beautiful area.
It is a beautiful area, yeah. And with the glaciers and glacial lakes, it was just a place in the world where I felt really connected to the planet, and
cool.
and therefore I learned to be really cognizant and conscious of water. And so when I went to school at UBC, I started in the chemistry program, and I kind of felt like there wasn't really quite what I was looking for. And then I transferred over to the geology department, and taking all that background of chemistry with me and that passion of water, the obvious place for me was to apply that in the geochemistry space.
Okay.
And from there, I took the right courses and graduated, and I came out with a kind of an oddball degree, but ultimately there was a place for me, and it was an important one too, I think.
That's awesome. Wow. So you've been kind of like thinking about the earth and taking care of it, like probably since you were a young child.
There was an element of sustainability in the mindset right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I
cool.
love the natural world, and I want to preserve it as much as I can, but at the same time, the demand for metals, the demand for consumption is real. And
Yes.
working in the mining industry and actually trying to address the sustainability of the planet while still trying to achieve the economic and industrial goals, I felt like that was a very real place for me to apply my skills.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and sustainability. I mean, we hear that word so often, but it's like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
And can we be sustainable? I mean, because we always like to preach here. It's best to mine in countries that have these high standards of practice instead of like, okay, I want all these cool minerals and materials, but I don't really care where they come from. I think it's really important for everyone who consumes materials, which is, you know, everyone on the planet, to know where and how these things are extracted. And
yeah, it's a really, really good point. And you know, I actually have I've worked in a large number of jurisdictions globally, from Papua New Guinea to Mongolia, Australia, Peru, Brazil, Mexico, Canada, and you're right. There is significant differentiation between those jurisdictions on what's expected.
yes.
However, Canadian engineers and geoscientists are well respected globally. We have a very stringent requirement, and of course one of those requirements is doing the ethical test. I know that doing an ethical test you can sort of game it, but the reality is that there's actually good meaning behind it. And I think that any engineer or geoscientist who takes their role seriously, they're going to feel that there's an obligation to public safety and the environment. And ultimately, as I said before, that's what I'm beholden to.
That's awesome. Yeah, ethical test. Huh,
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard of that one before, but I can understand how it could be important.
It's not just an ethical test, there's training and stuff like that as well. But I don't think that you can instill truth in that regard unless you already sort of believe that there's a higher calling.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying that like I have a mission from God or anything, but it's just like you do what you can with what you have.
Yes.
And if we think about what we have here, we have one planet.
Yes.
And if we don't treat it right, we're heading down. I'm not going to say things are really bad, but let's be honest. I think there's a lot of stressors, and the best we can do is the best we can do. And if we're not doing the best we can do, what are we doing?
Right.
Right?
No, I agree.
And I think that the training that we get in Canada, and quite frankly, the engineering programs, geoscientist programs are as well. They try to emphasize the importance of that.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, I love that. That's
Yeah.
great. That's great. So, what's do you have like a favorite commodity that you like just love working on, or is it always just like back to water?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question too. So I moved to Australia about 15 years ago, and we started doing work in Queensland. And one of the
Cool.
reasons I thought about moving to Queensland was because of their coal industry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's literally probably, I kind of thought it was like, oh, this is the dirtiest industry on the planet. Man,
Right.
if I can make a difference anywhere, it's going to be here. But it turns out that a lot of my clients weren't in coal. So they were doing things like copper mining or gold mining, and I actually learned to appreciate copper more than most other metals.
Oh, cool.
I do think there's value in, like there's obviously value in all these different commodities. But copper is a tricky one. Copper is really needed, and it's so integral in the transition to electrical energy, and that's part of it, I guess. And the other part of it is it's challenging.
Yes.
The deposits where copper is found is usually fairly high risk material, and there's a part of me that just sort of says like, yeah, this is a great place to work. We're trying to better humanity by moving to electrical systems. Copper is part of that. And also it's high-risk materials, which means that my skills are often in demand.
Wow.
So it's a natural sort of intersect between utility and sort of objectives.
Cool. And we say high risk. What does that mean?
Yeah, good question. So high risk in this case means like the materials that are pulled out of the earth tend to be acid generating. They tend to be detrimental to the environment. And so that's really where my skills become really useful.
Gotcha. Right, because you have to make sure it's contained all throughout the entire process.
Yeah, to some degree, yes. And it's not always going to be contained, but we aim to do what we can to minimize risk, minimize exposure, and ultimately protect the environment where we can.
Cool, that's amazing. So overall, how do you like PDAC? I'm curious.
Oh, it's a wild ride. I mean, aside from the the difficulties of trying to stand up for 7 hours a day, getting to sit down with you and have a chat about things it's a really nice change.
Fantastic.
But yeah, PDAC is a great event. It's fantastic. It's kind of like a family getting together. I mean, it's a big family, right?
Indeed it is. Yeah, 30,000 family.
Yeah, 30,000 members.
Yes.
But the mining industry is it's kind of inclusive. There's a lot of great people who work in the mining industry, and I make it a goal to find the ones that I can work with.
Cool.
Right.
Yeah, that are up to your same standards.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly
no, we feel
right.
the same way. You always want to work with those people who you can relate to and who have that same moral code as you do.
Exactly, and present things honestly, and then they take that advice and they say, yeah, no, this is important to us too. Help us get there.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Fantastic. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on my show. I appreciate that. Yes.
I had a great time. Thank you so much, Crystal. All right, cool.
Sweet. All right, hi everyone. We are here again at PDAC. I have Jake with me, and we're going to talk a little bit about what he does. Jake, give us an intro. What do you do?
Yeah, so I work for DeRouge Geological Consulting, and so we are a geologic consulting service entity, headquartered out of Edmonton, Alberta. We have an office in Montreal and Vancouver, and as well as Denver, and that's where I'm housed. I'm on the U.S. side of things.
Cool.
So what I do at DeRouge is I'm a resource geologist and also a business development individual.
A resource geologist, that's awesome.
Yeah,
so you get to actually figure out, like, is the mine economical and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that bridge between like the exploration and kind of like a little bit of the production, but also it's that, kind of way to like get it. It's the specialty within geology, within mining, where you're doing a lot of the study work, you're quantifying how much, you're de-risking the project, applying classification, and then ultimately a lot of what a resource geo does is, then the downstream, results of what they do then goes into, your reports, your technical reports, and then, what stage study that client is, then, you're doing that technical report, like an NI 43101 or SK 1300. So it's a very specialized part of it, but I love it. Like it's technical. You got to kind of leverage on experiences, and the other part of it too is like the network that I have too is like you're able to like ask questions to people if like you need some sort of level of certainty on things.
Right. That's cool. So we've been talking a lot over the last couple of days of like what is the next hot commodity, right? So we've heard a lot from gold is coming back up. Copper is the new thing, and then people are talking about antimony. What commodities are people talking about in your world?
I've heard a lot of that. The big surprise that I've been busy with is coal.
Really?
And coal, not only from a thermal aspect, all the way up through metallurgical and even high vol met coal and anthracite.
Interesting.
There's just been a lot of, especially with the mining industry and commodities. Always there's either economic things or geopolitical things that influence a lot of these different commodities, and a lot of the political or geopolitical instability, especially with Russia and Ukraine. There's just been a lot of market disruption in that, and even though that conflict's been going on for a while, and again, it's not the single cause for why that market's getting shaken up, but because that market has been kind of displaced for a long time, and it wasn't short, and it's been a long-term displacement, that markets are kind of getting jostled around and resettled.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Huh. So are you having clients who are coming to you and say, we want to find a coal mine to open, or? Yeah,
or just like a lot of due diligence work on different aspects and everything. So, and it's, I've been fortunate because like when I started and graduated out of university, I went and worked in the Powder River Basin up in Wyoming, and I spent time up there, and then did some, a lot of coal work in British Columbia. So like, there's it's interesting because like I started as a coal geo, and a lot of coal specialists are either retired or moved around in the industry. So it's like uranium, that commodities kind of had like that, a lot of individuals have either left that commodity or the industry in entirety.
Right.
So there's just been, even from a technical perspective.
Huh.
Yeah.
So are you just saying there's not a lot of experts in that realm?
There are. I mean, there's plenty of individuals, but
Okay.
to be really honest, like the coal industry's gotten a lot of punches in the last.
It's taken a lot of hard hits lately.
And there's just been a lot of, turmoil. I don't want to say that in like a bad way. It's just the commodity itself has just had a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty, but it still hasn't been replaced with anything else. So it's like we still need it, but yeah, what do we do?
Yeah, it's weird because it's like one of that like fixed cap volume type of thing, and it's just there's not new boilers being constructed. Power plants aren't being constructed because they're utilizing other diversity and energy situations. So so it's relying on a lot of older institutions, older setups, especially on the thermal side. And then like what's really interesting about coal is like you've got all these different types of thermal coal, but then when you get into the metallurgical coal and the coking coal and like the high vol coal, like it's a completely different industry. Like, and how they use it, how they send it. It's like a good anthracite can be mined in Pennsylvania and it could be used in Japan.
Wow.
So it's crazy.
That is crazy. That's a long way to travel for a commodity.
It is.
Oh my goodness, that's expensive travel.
Exactly.
Huh.
So but that's been like kind of the weird, interesting take that I've been seeing lately.
Yeah, well, I haven't heard that one before, so that's pretty good insight. But I would like to know, so Jake, you've been in the industry for a minute. What got you excited or into mining? How did you end up here?
So I started day one, right before I went into college, knowing I was going to do geology.
Cool.
And I started it being a dinosaur nerd. And I wanted to do paleontology. And so I did that for a while. And then this is actually kind of a really cool, interesting story because there was an individual that graduated from my university. And I didn't go to a mining school. I went to a state school. I went to the University of Nebraska in Omaha.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we like that university, and still today doesn't have an advanced degree. So there's no master's program, no doctorate. So that at my university, it was either you went into environmental, you went to another university to get your advanced degree, or you just did an industry track thing. And that was kind of the three options there. And then this individual was working for BHP out in Western Australia at the time, and came to my university and gave a conversation and just was showing us about this thing. And I was like, that sounds cool. I want to do that. And then one of my summers before I graduated college, I got an internship from a mining contractor. And then I came out of school with a job right away, and then just immediately started working.
Wow.
And then haven't left the industry, and ever since that day, I've just been continually working in the mining industry.
Awesome.
It was good. It was a good fit too. Like growing up, like I grew up in Western Iowa, rural farm community. 30 minutes to town type of thing. And my dad was a diesel mechanic, like a heavy operator diesel mechanic. So on the weekends, especially in small communities where like traditionally like it's agriculture or like that kind of like mom and pop type of thing. So my dad would be, during the Monday through Friday, would work on equipment for the Komatsu dealership he worked for. And then on Saturday, Sunday, and even Friday nights, we would go and travel to our friends and to my dad's neighbors and our neighbors, and like he would help their farming equipment.
Oh wow!
And then I would get stuck cleaning out hog pens and
forced
labor.
Not as fun. Yeah, child labor. Yes.
But as I grew older and like I garnered more responsibility, I started operating dozers. I started operating excavators and bobcats. So like that tangible understanding how equipment moves. I kind of learned that as like a base level. So like that made the progression from undergrad, non-mining school, because like a lot of the geos that come out of mining schools get that kind of holistic exposure to equipment. And then like if you don't have that equipment exposure, especially for a production environment, you don't really understand. It's kind of like mines are always like a symphony.
Yeah.
And like you have to understand like how the equipment's moving and all of that. And it's just if you're comfortable with that, it makes it really easy to assimilate. And I feel like I got a lot of that from my childhood.
Really cool. Yeah, no, I love how you put that. A mine is like a symphony, because you're, I mean, you're right. There's a million different moving parts, and it's really important to understand how they all work together.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and
Cool.
it's just like how people move ergonomically. Like you have to understand and respect the equipment, and like
Yes.
know how to operate and drive around the equipment.
Yes.
And it's just like if you don't have that, it gets either it's really intimidating or like, you know, it's just a learning curve because
Yeah.
it is dangerous, right? Like.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
yeah, you have to be careful. I mean,
Especially like last year, like the amount of like, I forget if I butcher the term, but the MSHA incidents is there was a lot of like, you know, movement vehicle incidents.
yeah, a lot
in
of
the
it's
US.
always powered haulage.
Yeah,
Not
exactly,
always,
yes,
but
power
that's like a
haulage.
lot of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, you got to be careful around equipment. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to do the same type of awareness when we're out in the field, right? We don't have, you know, we're not working with dozers, but still ATVs. You have to be extremely careful about how you go about them. I mean, you can't just. Safety is never comes second. Safety is always your number one priority.
Oh yeah, and you know, and that's exactly it. You know, it's just there's been you may not think it's going to happen to you because you're just some geo doing stuff and just running around.
You can never have that attitude, no. I mean, and you could say that about almost any industry, right?
Yeah,
you can't
for sure.
be complacent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, if you were to like give advice to some young kids who like didn't know what they wanted to do in their career, would you have any advice for them? Like.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I really find rewarding because I did have a good mentor when I started the industry, and that like if you have a good mentor, like it's so much easier. So the first part of that would be reach out, try and find mentors. Like I mentor a lot of people.
Cool.
I don't mentor enough as I would like, just because I just don't have bandwidth,
Right.
you know, to do everything. But I would definitely like if you could find a really good mentor and someone that like you want to be when you grow up. Because whenever I talk with people, like even if I'm hiring them or just talking with them and giving them career advice, the one question I always ask is where do you want to be in 5 years?
Yes.
And that's another part of this mentorship thing, because your career will move so many different times. I mean, like even look at yourself, like where you know how you started, and then like even how Burgess has expanded.
Yes.
You guys have grown into different business parts of the the mining industry.
No, that's exactly right.
And you're just not going to be that person, and like you should always think about, okay, well, where am I going to be in 5 years?
Right. How am I going to evolve? What do I want to really focus in on?
Yeah, and then like one thing that I always really like doing is like SMART goals, right? Like to where you create your SMART goals. I mean, everyone's very familiar with those.
Oh yeah.
But if you have that, where do I want to be in my career? And then you build those SMART goals around it, like you can really become effective and take advantage of, opportunities, because sometimes things come up and you're just like, well, should I do this? Should I not do this? And then like, you just got to kind of be fearless and just take those opportunities.
That's right. Be fearless.
Yeah.
Exactly. Especially if you're in mining. Cool. Well, hey, thank you for the
so
time.
much.
That was awesome. I love the insights. That was wonderful.
Awesome. Well, perfect.
Cool.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for joining us again here at PDAC. It was an awesome time. Special thank you to our guests, Bruno, Ro, and Jake. It was lovely to hear about them and how they support the mining industry and how they got into it and what they're seeing in the commodity space. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.